I never thought the day would come when my own sister would strip me of my dignity in front of my entire family. For years, I worked 2 jobs, saved every coin I could denied myself small comforts, all for one purpose: to secure a future for my son. That money was never mine alone. It was the bridge to his dreams, the shield against the world's cruelty, the one thing I held on to when everything else seemed uncertain. But one night, in our parents' living room, crowded with relatives, my sister stood up with her voice trembling in rehearsed indignation and called me greedy. She pointed to the very money she had stolen and held it up as proof that I was hiding wealth from the family. In that moment, I felt like the walls collapsed inward, every pair of eyes turning into knives aimed at my chest. They looked at me not as a mother, not as the woman who had sacrificed silently for years, but as a liar, a miser, a selfish woman who had betrayed their trust. My son sat frozen at the corner of the table, his face pale, his jaw tight. He didn't say a word. He didn't know what to believe. And that was the deepest wound of all, watching the one person I lived for hesitate, doubt me, because of the venom dripping from my sister's mouth. I want to tell you exactly how it happened, but first let me ask you, can you imagine being accused by your own blood, the same sister you once protected, as a child of being the very thing she had become? Have you ever had your entire life reduced to a single, humiliating scene, while the people you love the most sit and watch without lifting a finger to defend you? If you were in my place, would you stay silent to keep the peace, or would you fight back no matter the cost? Comment 1. If you believe I had to fight for the truth. Hit like if you think silence could have been an option. But stay with me, because what happened after that accusation will haunt me forever, and the way I turn the tables will shock you even more. The night began like so many family gatherings. My parents had invited us all to dinner at their house. The table was crowded with plates of roasted chicken, rice, beans, and salad. The smell of garlic and onions filled the air, a scent that usually meant comfort home belonging. But underneath it that night, I sensed something else, something sharp and bitter like smoke just before fire. My sister barely looked at me when I entered. She smiled too much at others, poured wine too generously, laughed too loudly. I knew that behavior well. It was the mask she wore whenever she was hiding something. I ignored it, thinking the evening would pass like any other, full of little tensions and unspoken resentments, but nothing catastrophic. I was wrong. Halfway through dinner, after the plates had been cleared and only glasses of wine remained, she pushed her chair back with a scrape so loud it silenced the room. My heart skipped. She stood up, her hands clutching a folded envelope, and her eyes burned holes into mine. "I can't stay quiet anymore," she announced, her voice trembling just enough to seem sincere. "My sister has been hoarding money in secret, hiding it from all of us, and pretending she's struggling while the rest of us do everything to support her." Gasps erupted around the table. My father frowned. My mother's hand froze mid-air, my cousins whispered behind their hands. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could, she yanked the envelope open and spilled cash across the table. "Here is the proof," she cried. "I found it hidden away. She's been deceiving us for years. She's greedy, selfish, only thinking about herself." The room tilted. I felt like the floor had given way under my feet. That was my son's future spread out like dirty laundry across the table. My sacrifices, those long nights making sandwiches, instead of buying lunch, those hours walking to work to save bus fare. Those times I told my boy we couldn't buy new shoes, yet all of it mocked, twisted, used against me. I looked at my son. His eyes darted from the money to me, confusion carving deep lines into his young face. He looked betrayed, and I thought my heart would stop beating. Do you understand that kind of pain when someone you love more than your own life hesitates to believe you? When their silence is louder than any accusation, I wanted to scream, to claw the air, to shake my sister until her lies spilled out of her mouth. But no sound came. My tongue was stone. My throat was fire. My dignity shattered on the floor like glass. I swallowed hard, every muscle in my body trembling. "That money was never for me," I whispered. But my voice was drowned out by the chatter, the shock, the judgment. My mother shook her head as if ashamed of me. My father muttered something about disappointment. My cousins stared like I was a stranger, like they had never known me. My sister smirked, triumphant, relishing every second. I wanted to stand, to slam my fist on the table, to shout that she was the thief, not me. But my body betrayed me. I sat frozen while their eyes devoured me whole. My son stood slowly, his chair scraping the floor. He didn't look at me. He just walked out of the room, leaving me behind. That sound, the scrape of his chair, the slam of the door, echoed in my skull like a death knell. And that is how my story begins. Humiliation, betrayal, silence. But what they didn't know is that I had prepared for storms like this. That every coin I saved, every bill I deposited, every transaction I made left a trail deeper than my sister could ever cover up. What they didn't know is that I had proof that one day soon I would bring it all to light, and when I did, it would not just expose her lies, but burn down the false image she had built for herself. This is not a story about money. This is a story about trust, about betrayal, about how family can wound you in ways strangers never could. And it is also a story about fire, the kind that destroys and the kind that purifies. So stay with me, because if you think what I've told you so far is shocking, wait until you see how I turned my sister's crime into the weapon that restored my dignity. Comment 1 if you believe betrayal must be confronted no matter the cost. Hit like if you believe silence keeps families together. Either way, I want to know, what would you have done if your own sister stole from you, lied to everyone, and made you look like the villain in front of your child? I didn't always live with suspicion in my heart. For the longest time, I believed family meant safety. I believed my sister, despite her flaws, still carried the same innocence of the little girl I once shielded from our father's anger when she spilled juice on his papers. But that belief began to crumble months before the night she betrayed me publicly. I remember the first time I felt the unease. It was a late evening, and I had just returned home from my second shift at the diner. My son was asleep, his school book spread across the small dining table, the lamp casting a warm glow over his tired face. I tiptoed to the bedroom where I kept the small locked box of savings under the bed. I had been adding to it quietly, little by little, sometimes only a few coins, sometimes a few bills. That night, as I counted, I noticed the total was off. A few bills missing. It was small enough to make me doubt myself. Had I miscounted before? Did I forget to record it? I shrugged it off, too tired to dwell on it. But deep down, something gnawed at me. A week later, the same thing happened. Another small amount missing, just enough to make me question my memory. I told myself I was being paranoid. I had been working double shifts. Maybe I was confused. Maybe I had misplaced it. After all, who would steal from me? Who would dare touch the very money that was meant for my son's college fund? Still, the doubt lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. I tried to dismiss it, but every time I opened that box, my hands shook. One Saturday morning, my sister dropped by unexpectedly. She carried a cake from the bakery, smiling too brightly, her perfume filling the tiny apartment like smoke. She hugged me tightly, her nails digging into my back a little too long, and said, "I just thought I'd visit. It's been so long." I remember her eyes darting around the room as she set the cake down. They lingered on the shelf where I sometimes kept envelopes of cash before transferring them to the box. My son was in the corner, sketching quietly, oblivious to the tension thickening the air. My sister asked casual questions, how much I was working, whether I was saving anything, whether I ever thought of treating myself instead of hoarding for the future. Her tone was light, but I felt the edge underneath. I told her the truth, or at least the version of truth I allowed others to know, that I was saving what little I could, that it was hard but worth it. She nodded, but her smile never reached her eyes. It was then that the splinter of doubt pushed deeper. That night after she left, I checked the box again. 2 more bills gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, the silence of the apartment pressing against my ears. My son's breathing from the other room was steady, innocent. I wanted to believe it was a mistake that I had miscounted again, but the timing was too sharp to ignore. My hands trembled as I closed the box and shoved it back under the bed. My heart pounded with a fear I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just about the money, it was about trust. Do you know what it feels like to suspect the very person you once trusted with your deepest secrets? The person you once cried with at night when your parents fought. The person you once promised you would always protect. That suspicion is a poison. It doesn't kill you right away, but it seeps into your blood. It keeps you awake at night. It makes every smile look false, every word sound like a lie. A few days later, the doubt grew heavier when I overheard my sister speaking on the phone. She didn't know I was in the hallway outside her apartment. I had stopped by to drop off some papers for our mother. Through the door, I heard her laugh, sharp and bitter. "She doesn't even realize it," she said. "I take a little at a time, and she thinks she just miscounts. She's always been stupid with money, always so obsessed with saving. She calls it planning for her son, but really she's just greedy. Pathetic." Those words sliced through me like glass. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. She was talking about me. There was no mistaking it. My own sister mocking me, justifying her theft by painting me as greedy as pathetic. My chest tightened, and I wanted to storm in, confront her, scream in her face. But I froze. My legs wouldn't move. My pride wouldn't let me reveal I had been listening. So I walked away quietly, each step heavier than the last, my ears burning with humiliation. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table staring at my hands. The nails bitten the skin cracked from years of dish soap and cleaning chemicals, the hands that had built every penny in that box. My sister's words replayed over and over. Greedy, pathetic. I had sacrificed everything for my son. I had gone without new clothes, without vacations, without even decent meals some weeks. And she called me greedy. I pressed my fists against my eyes until I saw sparks. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I made breakfast for my son, walked him to school, went to work, smiled at customers. But inside, the poison of suspicion had become certainty. My sister had been stealing from me. My sister had been betraying me all along. Yet I had no proof, only my memory of her cruel words through the door and the missing money. And without proof, I was powerless. If I confronted her, she would deny it, twist. It'd make me look insane. She was always skilled at manipulation. So I stayed silent. I pretended not to notice. I thought maybe if I ignored it, she would stop. But she didn't stop. The missing money grew little by little until the box felt lighter every time I lifted it. My chest felt hollow with dread. My son asked one night, "Mom, are we still going to be okay for college?" His eyes wide, so full of trust. I forced a smile and told him yes, we would be fine. But in my heart, I wasn't sure anymore. That was the beginning of the unraveling. That was the first crack in the foundation of trust, the moment when I realized I wasn't just fighting against poverty, against exhaustion, against the world outside. I was fighting against my own blood, and the cruelest part was knowing that I still loved her despite everything. That love made the betrayal sharper, the suspicion more suffocating. I wanted to believe she would stop, that she would come to her senses. But deep down, I knew. The poison was already spreading, and it was only a matter of time before the whole house of lies came crashing down. If the first signs of betrayal were like splinters beneath my skin, the second wave was like knives, twisting deeper, drawing blood I could no longer ignore. Suspicion alone is a lonely prison, but when others start to see what you've been too ashamed to admit, the prison doors creak open, and the truth becomes impossible to silence. It happened one late afternoon in early spring. The sun was setting, painting our neighborhood in shades of gold and shadow, when Mrs. Alvarez, my elderly neighbor from across the hall, stopped me as I carried groceries upstairs. Her voice was gentle, hesitant, but her eyes searched mine with concern. "I don't mean to pry," she began, "but I thought you should know." I've noticed your sister coming around when you're not home. My arm stiffened around the bags of rice and beans. Coming around, I asked, trying to sound casual, though my stomach churned. Mrs. Alvarez nodded, her silver hair catching the dying light from the window. Yes. Twice last week. She had a spare key, I think. She let herself in quickly, looking over her shoulder as if she didn't want anyone to see. I didn't think much of it at first, but then yesterday I saw her leave again, holding a small envelope in her hand. She tucked it into her purse before hurrying away. Her words struck like thunder. The envelope, the missing bills. My throat closed, and for a moment I thought I would drop the groceries right there in the hall. I managed a stiff smile. Maybe she was just picking up something for me. I lied, my voice hollow. But Mrs. Alvarez tilted her head, studying me with the keen eyes of someone who has lived too long to be fooled by half-truths. Perhaps. Still, I thought you should know. Families. They can be complicated. She touched my arm gently before retreating into her apartment, leaving me standing frozen with the groceries digging into my skin. I went inside, dropped the bags onto the counter, and sat at the table, my hands trembling. My heart pounded as though it wanted to escape my chest. I had been right. She had been sneaking into my home, stealing what little I had. The image of her sliding that envelope into her purse burned in my mind. I pressed my palms against the cool surface of the table and tried to breathe. I wanted to confront her right then. I wanted to storm to her apartment, pound on her door, and scream, "How dare you? How dare you betray me? Betray your nephew after everything I've done for you?" But fear held me back. Fear of her twisting the story. Fear of my parents believing her over me. Fear of looking paranoid. She was charming, clever, always the favorite child who could turn tears on and off like a faucet. If I accused her without proof, I would be the bitter, jealous sister once again. That night I couldn't eat. My son noticed my silence, pushing his plate of rice and beans aside. "Mom." "What's wrong?" he asked. His dark eyes searched mine, so full of innocence and trust it nearly broke me. I forced a smile. "Just tired, sweetheart. Work has been long." He nodded, accepting the lie, and I hated myself for it. But lies were becoming the currency of survival in my family. The following week, the evidence piled higher. My cousin Letitia came by to borrow a book. As she browsed my small shelf, she lowered her voice and said, "I don't want to cause problems, but I overheard your sister bragging at a party last weekend. She was telling a friend that you're a fool for saving money in the house instead of the bank." She laughed, said you treat it like some dragon hoard, and that it was only fair she take a little since you wouldn't miss it. I thought she was joking, but she sounded serious. I gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles whitened. The room tilted. Bragging. She wasn't just stealing, she was mocking me, making me the punchline of her private comedy. I nodded to Letitia, thanked her, and promised not to overreact, though inside I was boiling. That night, I dreamed of my sister as a child. She was 7, standing in the rain, clutching my hand, sobbing because our father had shouted at her for breaking a vase. I had shielded her with my body, taken the blame, even endured the slap meant for her. "Don't cry," I had whispered. "I'll always protect you." Waking from that dream, I pressed a hand to my chest. How had we come to this? How had that frightened little girl grown into a woman who could laugh about stealing from me, from her own nephew? Every small detail now seemed suspicious. When she called to check in, her voice too sweet, I heard poison beneath the honey. When she hugged me at Sunday lunch, her arms felt like chains tightening around my ribs. Even my parents seemed complicit, praising her for her generosity while questioning my choices. "Why don't you spend more on yourself?" my mother asked one afternoon. "Your sister says you hoard money, but what good is it if you never enjoy life?" The words cut deep. My sister had already begun weaving her web, painting me as selfish, greedy, obsessed with saving. She was building a story long before the night of the public accusation, a story where she was the concerned sibling and I was the miser, and everyone was buying it. One evening, I returned home to find my door slightly ajar. My heart stopped. I pushed it open slowly, my breath shallow. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. On the table, the savings box sat askew, its lid not quite closed. I rushed to it, hands trembling, and opened it. More money gone. Not just a few bills this time, but a thick wad. My chest tightened, my knees weak. I sat on the floor clutching the box, tears blurring my vision. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. My sister was stealing systematically, and she was escalating. She no longer cared if I noticed. She believed she was untouchable, that her lies would protect her, that our parents and relatives would side with her, no matter what. She believed she could take everything and leave me with nothing, not even my dignity. I wanted to call the police. I wanted to expose her immediately. But then I thought of my son, his future, his college fund. If the money was tied up in scandal, in legal battles, would he ever see it? My sister had trapped me in silence, counting on my fear, my desire to protect my son above all else. Do you know what that does to a person? To watch everything you've built, every sacrifice vanish piece by piece into the hands of someone who laughs at your pain. To know that speaking up might destroy your family, but staying silent will destroy your soul. That is the prison I lived in. Every day the walls closed, tighter, the air thinner. And still I smiled at work, cooked dinner for my son, paid bills, carried on. Because mothers don't get to collapse. We don't get to surrender. But inside I was breaking. The neighbor had seen her. My cousin had heard her. The money was disappearing faster. The story she spun about me was spreading like wildfire. It was only a matter of time before the poison consumed everything. And I feared, more than anything, that when the moment came, even my son would not stand on my side. That was round 2 of the storm, the whispers, the witnesses, the silent thefts that became louder than any scream. And I still thought I could endure it quietly. I still thought I could protect everyone. But I was wrong. Silence is never protection. Silence is a weapon in the hands of those who know how to use it. And my sister wielded it like a blade aimed at my throat. By the time the third wave came crashing down, I was already hanging by a thread. Suspicion had poisoned me. Whispers from others had confirmed my worst fears, but nothing prepared me for the open humiliation that would follow. It wasn't enough for my sister to steal behind my back. She wanted me stripped bare in front of everyone. She wanted my name dragged through the dirt, my dignity shattered, my son's faith in me crushed. It was a Sunday evening when my parents decided to host a family dinner. These dinners were supposed to be tradition laughter food cousins, running around stories shared between courses. But in truth, they had long since turned into a theater of comparison. My sister, always the actress, played the role of the successful, generous daughter. I was cast as the struggling one, the woman who never managed her life right. I knew the script by heart, but I never expected the performance she had planned that night. I remember walking into my parents' house with my son. The smell of roasted chicken and potatoes filled the air. The table gleamed with polished silverware glasses shining under the chandelier. My relatives filled the seats, talking and laughing, their voices rising like smoke. My mother kissed my cheek distractedly, her eyes already glowing with pride, as she looked at my sister, who sat at the head of the table as if she were the hostess. She wore a silk blouse, diamonds at her ears, her smile so radiant it hurt to look at. I knew it was a mask, but to everyone else it was light. We sat down, my son beside me, quiet, shy, fiddling with his napkin. He'd been withdrawn lately, picking up on the tension I tried so hard to hide. I touched his shoulder, whispered, "It's okay, though." I wasn't sure I believed it. The meal began, small talk floating around the table. My father bragged about my sister's new promotion. My cousins praised her taste in wine. I sat silent, chewing, slowly swallowing bitterness with every bite. Then when the plates had been cleared and only glasses remained, the air shifted. My sister placed her fork down with deliberate grace. She looked around the table, sighed as if burdened by a heavy conscience, and then turned her eyes on me. I wasn't going to say anything, she began, her voice trembling with manufactured sincerity. But I can't watch this any longer. I can't watch my sister deceive all of you." The table fell silent. Forks paused midair. My heart froze. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. With a dramatic flourish, she tore it open and spilled stacks of cash across the table. Bills fluttered onto plates slid across the polished wood. Gasps filled the air. My father leaned forward. My mother clutched her pearls. My cousins exchanged shocked glances. This, my sister declared, is what she's been hiding for years. She acts like she's poor, like she struggles, but the truth is she's been hoarding money behind everyone's back. She calls it saving for her son, but what it really is greed. Pure greed. The words slammed into me like fists. Greed, greed. She said it so easily as if it were the only truth. My stomach twisted. My son's eyes widened as he stared at the cash, then at me. His lips parted, but no words came. I tried to speak. My throat was tight, my voice a whisper. That money. But she cut me off, her voice rising righteous. "Don't lie, sister. Everyone knows you never spend, never share. You hoard, you hide, you keep secrets. And while the rest of us struggle, you sit on piles of cash, pretending to be a martyr." Murmurs rose. My aunt shook her head. "I always thought something was off." My uncle muttered greedy, just like her father. My mother's eyes were filled with disappointment, my father's with quiet fury. I looked at my son. He stared at me, his eyes dark with confusion hurt. He whispered, barely audible, "Mom." "Is it true?" My heart cracked. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. That tiny motion broke me more than any word could. I wanted to scream that it was a lie, that every dollar on that table was soaked in my sweat, my exhaustion, my sacrifices. I wanted to shout that my sister had stolen it from me, twisted the story, poisoned their minds. But the words stuck in my throat. My sister's performance was too polished, her timing too perfect. She had planted seeds of doubt long before this night, and now they bloomed in poisonous flowers. I sat frozen as the accusations piled up. "How could you? We trusted you. You've embarrassed the family." Each voice a stone hurled at my chest. My sister sat back, her eyes glinting with victory, the corners of her mouth twitching with the ghost of a smirk. My son stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. He looked at me one last time, his face pale, his lips pressed tight. Then he turned and walked out of the room. The slam of the door echoed like a gunshot. The silence that followed was deafening. My relatives stared at me as if I were a stranger, a criminal. My mother sighed, shaking her head. "We raised you better than this," she said. My father muttered, "What a shame, shame." The word wrapped around me like chains. I lowered my head, unable to meet their eyes. My sister reached across the table, gathering the money back into the envelope with exaggerated care. "Don't worry," she said sweetly. "I'll make sure this doesn't go to waste." Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw triumph. She had won. That night, I left my parents' house in silence. My son refused to speak to me in the car. He stared out the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. I drove home with my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My chest felt hollow, my throat raw. I wanted to cry, but the tears refused to come. I had no voice left. At home, he went straight to his room, slamming the door. I sat at the kitchen table, the dim light casting shadows across the walls. My hands trembled as I reached for the savings box, now nearly empty. I opened it, stared at the scraps of bills left behind, and felt a sob rise in my chest. Everything I had worked for, stolen, twisted, used against me. I thought of my sister's words, greed, liar, selfish, and they wrapped around me like ropes, dragging me down. I pressed my hands to my face, the sobs finally breaking free. I cried until my chest ached, until my eyes burned, until the night turned into dawn. That was the third wave, the open humiliation. The night my sister took not just my money, but my dignity, my son's trust, my family's love. And I thought I couldn't sink any lower, but I was wrong. The storm was only beginning. The night after that dinner was the longest of my life. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the clock ticking like a hammer in the silence. My son hadn't spoken to me since we got home. His door stayed closed, the sound of his music muffled through the walls, a barrier between us heavier than steel. I sat there staring at the shadows on the ceiling, replaying every second of my sister's accusation, every look of contempt from my parents, every whisper of judgment from my relatives. Shame crawled over my skin like ants, relentless and burning. I had thought I knew humiliation before when I had to borrow money to pay rent, when I stood in line for groceries with coupons while my sister flaunted new clothes. But nothing compared to that moment at the table when she spilled my stolen savings across the polished wood and called me greedy. I was stripped naked in front of the people whose opinions had shaped me my entire life. Worse, I had been stripped in front of my son, the one person I had sworn to protect from every cruelty. And I had failed. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face as he looked at me, confused, uncertain, as if he no longer knew who I was. I remembered the little boy who once clung to my leg when he was afraid, who whispered, "I trust you, Mom," whenever the world seemed too big. And now, because of her lies, that trust was fractured. Do you know what it feels like to watch the light of your child's faith dim? It's like suffocating slowly while pretending to breathe. By morning, my body ached with exhaustion, but I forced myself up, made breakfast, knocked softly on his door. He opened it just a crack, his eyes shadowed. "Eat something," I whispered. He didn't answer. He just nodded stiffly, took the plate, and closed the door again. I leaned against the wall, fighting tears. My own son was slipping away from me, one silent gesture at a time. At work, I moved like a ghost. The clatter of dishes, the hiss of the coffee machine, the chatter of customers all blurred together. I dropped plates, forgot orders, smiled mechanically when my boss scolded me. Inside, I was somewhere else, replaying every second of the disaster. My sister's smirk, my father's mutter. What a shame. My mother's eyes filled with cold disappointment, and the slam of my son's chair as he walked out. That sound haunted me more than anything. The days after the dinner stretched like years. Every phone call from my mother was sharp-laced with criticism. Why didn't you just admit it? Why do you make things so difficult? Your sister was only trying to help. Help. The word made bile rise in my throat. Help by stealing. By lying, by destroying me in front of everyone, but I didn't argue. I swallowed the words. I let the poison spread. At night, memories returned uninvited. I saw myself as a little girl holding my sister's hand as our parents argued in the kitchen. She had always hidden behind me, letting me take the blows, letting me absorb the anger. I remembered shielding her from bullies at school, giving her my lunch, when she forgot hers, sneaking her into my room, when she was afraid of the dark. I had built my life around protecting her, and now she had used that trust as a weapon. My chest burned with a grief deeper than anger. My body began to break under the weight of it all. I stopped eating properly. My hands shook at work so badly I dropped mugs. My boss pulled me aside. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern flickering in his eyes. I lied, said I was fine. I went home each night, sat in the dark, and stared at the nearly empty savings box. The air felt heavy, as if even the walls pitied me. The breaking point came one evening when my son finally spoke. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen, his shoulders tense, his eyes wet. "Mom," he said softly, "why didn't you just tell me? Why did you hide it? Why does Aunt say you're greedy?" I don't understand. His voice cracked and each word tore through me. I reached for him, desperate. "Sweetheart, you have to believe me, I never—" But he pulled back his face, twisted with pain. "I want to believe you," he whispered, "but everyone says the same thing. Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt, they can't all be lying." He turned and walked away, leaving me shattered in the doorway. I collapsed at the table, sobs tearing out of me like knives. My chest heaved, my face buried in my hands. I had lost him. My sister had stolen not only money, but trust, love, the fragile bond between mother and son. And in that moment, I wanted to give up. Truly give up. to let the lies win, to let them crush me, to disappear quietly into the shadows. I sat there for hours staring at the box of savings. I thought about burning it, destroying what was left, ending the nightmare. But then a voice whispered in my mind, not my own voice, my sister's, laughing, mocking. She's pathetic. She's greedy. She'll never fight back. That voice cut deeper than any blade, and suddenly I knew giving up would mean she had won completely. I stood shaky but determined. I walked to my son's room, placed my hand on the door, whispered through the wood, "I will prove it to you. I swear on everything I will prove the truth." He didn't answer, but I needed him to hear it. I needed him to know that I wasn't done yet. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the memories of every humiliation pressing down on me. But beneath the shame, beneath the grief, something else stirred. A spark, a fire. I realized the storm wasn't over, it was only gathering, and I would either drown in it or I would rise with it. The night after my son's words cut me to the bone, I sat awake at the kitchen table, surrounded by silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. I had hit the bottom. Shame clung to me like smoke, and despair gnawed at my bones. But in that suffocating darkness, a strange clarity emerged. I realized something my sister had overlooked. For all her arrogance, for all her clever manipulation, she was careless. And carelessness leaves traces. I opened the savings box once more, though it was nearly empty. I pulled out the tiny notebook where I had recorded every deposit over the years. Dates, amounts, every coin and bill carefully logged in shaky handwriting. I stared at those numbers, and a thought sparked. Every time I deposited larger amounts, I had used the ATM to make it safer. And every time the bank had emailed me a digital receipt. My hands trembled as I opened my old laptop, its keys worn smooth from years of use. I logged into my email, the glow of the screen washing my tired face. There they were. Line after line of confirmation emails. Every deposit I had ever made. I clicked through them, my eyes scanning, and then it hit me, the withdrawals. Some weren't mine. Some bore my sister's name. She must have added her information as a secondary cardholder years ago. When she helped me open the account, I had trusted her too, trusting as always. And now her name was stamped on transaction after transaction withdrawals that matched the very nights I'd noticed money missing. My breath caught. Proof. Hard proof. My sister had left her fingerprints all over my stolen life. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, tears welling in my eyes. Not tears of despair this time, but something fiercer, hotter. For months I had been suffocating in silence. Now I had a weapon. I downloaded every receipt, every statement, and saved them to a flash drive. My hands moved with a steadiness I hadn't felt in weeks. I clicked through the bank's security options and found what I hoped for: ATM surveillance stills attached to some transactions. And there she was, my sister, smiling at the camera as she withdrew money. I pressed my palm against the screen, my chest tight. She had smiled. She had enjoyed it. That was the moment something shifted inside me. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't the woman cowering under her accusations. I was a mother, a fighter. And I was armed with truth. The fire that had flickered weakly inside me now roared. I whispered into the silence, "You will not destroy me, not this time." The next morning, I felt different. My reflection in the mirror still showed tired eyes and hollow cheeks, but behind them, burned determination. At work, I moved with focus. My boss noticed and asked if I was feeling better. I smiled faintly and said, "I'm getting there." He didn't know the storm I was preparing. That evening, I sat with my son at the kitchen table. He avoided my eyes, pushing his food around on his plate. My heart ached, but I steadied my voice. "Listen to me," I said softly. "I know you don't know what to believe right now. I know what Aunt said hurt you. But I need you to trust me one more time. Just once. I have proof. And soon you'll see it. You'll see the truth." He looked up, then his eyes wide, searching my face. "Proof," he whispered. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "Proof that I'm not what she says I am. Proof that everything I did for you. Just give me time." For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then he nodded slowly, hesitantly. It wasn't full trust, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall that separated us. And that crack was enough to let me breathe again. Over the next days, I gathered everything. Bank statements, screenshots of her transactions, photos of the ATM footage. I even went to Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor, and asked if she would testify to what she had seen. She clasped my hands and said, "Of course. Family or not wrong is wrong." Her words steadied me. Each piece of evidence was another brick in the case I was building, each document another weapon. I printed them, organized them, placed them in a folder. I even recorded voice memos of my own memories the times I overheard her bragging the dates money went missing. I wanted every detail preserved, and through it all, a strange calm settled over me. I was no longer drowning. I was swimming toward something, toward justice. One night, as I sat at the table sorting papers, I imagined the confrontation ahead. I pictured my sister's face when the lies collapsed, when the mask she wore cracked under the weight of truth. I pictured my parents' stunned silence, the whispers of relatives, my son's eyes widening as he saw his mother restored. The thought filled me with both dread and exhilaration. I knew it would be painful, messy, explosive, but it was coming. Do you understand that feeling when you shift from powerless to powerful, when the scales begin to tip and the storm that once threatened to drown you becomes the wind in your sails? That's where I was. The victim in me was dying, and something new was taking its place. So here I am now holding this folder, this arsenal of truth. And I want to ask you, what would you do if you were in my place? Would you confront her quietly, demand an apology, and let it end? Or would you take it to the family, to the public, and expose every lie, no matter the cost? Comment 1. If you believe the truth must be shouted so the whole world hears it. Hit like if you believe it's enough to simply know the truth in your own heart. But whatever you choose, stay with me, because the storm I am about to unleash will change everything. I didn't plan to see her that night, but fate has a way of cornering you when you least expect it. I had just finished my shift and was walking home under the pale light of the street lamps, the folder of evidence heavy in my bag, when I saw her, my sister. She was sitting outside a cafe sipping wine like a queen, laughing with a friend. Her head tilted back, her hands sparkling with new jewelry. My throat tightened. That necklace, how many of my stolen bills had bought it, I should have walked past. I should have waited for the grand reveal, for the public confrontation I was preparing. But something inside me snapped. Months of humiliation, nights of silent tears, my son's doubt, my parents' contempt, it all rushed through me like fire. I crossed the street before I could stop myself. She saw me and smiled that sharp smile she wore when she knew she had the upper hand. "Well, look who it is," she said, dismissing her friend with a flick of her hand. The greedy little saver. "Come to beg me for forgiveness." The words hit me like a slap, but this time I didn't flinch. I pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down, placing my bag on the table with deliberate calm. My hands trembled not from fear, but from contained fury. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low, steady. She leaned back, sipping her wine as if she were humoring me. "Talk about what your obsession with hiding money, or maybe your son finally realized you're a fraud." Her laugh was soft, cruel, dripping with venom. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. "No, about you, about what you've done." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before returning. "What I've done, please. You're losing it, sister. Everyone sees it. You're paranoid, unstable. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're inventing stories to cover your own greed." I opened my bag slowly, deliberately. Her eyes followed my movements, the first flicker of unease darting across her face. I pulled out the folder, flipped it open, and slid a stack of papers across the table. "Recognize these." She glanced down. Bank statements, her name printed neatly beside multiple withdrawals. Her face drained of color just slightly before she forced a laugh. Anyone can fake documents, she said, but her voice wasn't as steady as before. I leaned closer, my voice a whisper sharp enough to cut glass. These aren't fakes. They came straight from the bank. And look at this. I pulled out a still image from the ATM camera, her face caught in grainy black and white, smiling as she withdrew money. Smile for the camera, sister. You always did love an audience. Her hand shook as she set down her wine glass, the stem clinking against the table. For the first time, the mask cracked. You wouldn't dare show this to anyone, she hissed. I held her gaze, my anger burning cold and precise. You think I wouldn't? After everything you've done, after turning my son against me, after stealing years of sacrifice from me, I would burn down every lie you built and let the ashes choke you. Her eyes darted around, checking if anyone was listening. Her voice dropped. Fine. Maybe I took a little. But you never needed all of it. You hoarded like a miser. I deserved some. I'm family. And what's family if not sharing? The audacity of her words made me laugh, a bitter, humorless sound. Sharing you call sneaking into my home, stealing from your nephew's future, and then calling me greedy. Sharing? I slammed the folder, shut the sound, making her flinch. No, that's theft. That's betrayal. And I have proof. Proof that will tear your mask apart. For a moment, she sat frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Then she leaned forward, her eyes dark, her voice low and venomous. If you show that to anyone, you'll regret it. I'll make sure everyone thinks you forged it. I'll tell them you're unstable, that you're desperate. Who do you think they'll believe? The daughter who succeeded, or the one who wasted her life struggling? Her words were meant to scare me, but instead they ignited something deeper. I smiled, slow and cold. They'll believe the truth. Because I won't just tell them, I'll show them. Every receipt, every camera image, every witness. You built your little play so carefully, but you forgot the ending, and the ending is mine. Her lips parted, but no words came. For the first time in months, she looked small to me. Not the triumphant queen of the dinner table, not the actress basking in the spotlight, just a thief caught cornered trembling. I stood sliding the folder back into my bag. This was your warning, I said quietly. The next time, it won't be just me. It will be everyone. And when that happens, sister, there will be no stage big enough to hide your shame. I walked away, my heart pounding, my legs trembling, but my spirit ablaze. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of glass. Shattering, her hand must have knocked over the wine. I didn't turn back. For the first time in this nightmare, I had seen her mask slip. For the first time, she knew I wasn't broken. I wasn't silent. I was ready. That was the first climax. The private confrontation, the crack in her armor, the calm before the storm. Because the next battle would not be whispered in a cafe. It would be shouted in front of the entire family, and when the truth exploded, no one would ever look at her or me the same again. The confrontation at the cafe had been the first crack, but I knew it wasn't enough. A thief will always try to slither back into the shadows unless the truth is dragged into the light for all to see. My sister's threat still echoed in my head, her promise to twist the story to make me look unstable, to turn everyone against me. And she might have succeeded if I hadn't been ready. That was why, when our parents called another family gathering the following weekend, I knew the moment had come. The storm I had been preparing was about to break. I arrived with my son, the folder clutched in my hand like a weapon. The living room was crowded again, the smell of roasted meat filling the air, the clinking of glasses ringing with false warmth. My relatives were already seated, my mother in her usual chair at the head of the table, my father beside her, solemn and proud. My sister floated around the room like a hostess, her laughter spilling into every corner, her hand resting lightly on our mother's shoulder. When she saw me, her smile sharpened. She thought she had already won. We sat down. The meal began. I barely tasted the food, every bite like sand in my mouth. My son sat rigid beside me, his eyes fixed on his plate, his hands clenched in his lap. I wanted to squeeze his hand to reassure him, but I waited. Timing was everything. After dinner, as the plates were cleared, my sister rose again, just as she had the last time. "I need to say something," she began, her voice carrying that false tremble of sincerity. "I can't sit by while lies poison this family." My heart pounded, but this time I didn't shrink. I didn't flinch. I stood before she could finish my chair, scraping loudly across the floor. Every head turned. The room fell silent. "You've said enough," I told her, my voice clear, sharp. "Now it's my turn." A murmur rippled through the room. My father frowned. "What is this?" he asked, his tone impatient. My sister smirked, confident. "Oh, this should be good." Another excuse. I opened the folder and spread the papers across the table with deliberate calm. "These," I said, "are bank statements. Every deposit I made over the years, every withdrawal. And look here," I pointed to the highlighted lines. Withdrawals under her name. My sister's, not mine. Gasps filled the room. My mother leaned forward, squinting at the papers. "What is this supposed to prove?" she demanded. I pulled out the still photos next. Grainy black and white images of my sister at the ATM, cash in hand, her smile bright. I slid them across the table. It proves everything. She wasn't saving, she was stealing. And then she accused me of being greedy, of lying, when all along she was the thief. For a moment, silence. Then voices erupted. My uncle muttered, "Impossible." My aunt gasped, covering her mouth. My cousin leaned in closer to see the photos, her eyes widening. My sister's face drained of color before she forced a laugh. "Fakes," she said quickly. "She's desperate. She's making all of this up. Look at her. She's obsessed. She'll do anything to make me look bad." I leaned forward, my voice steady, my eyes locked on hers. "These came directly from the bank. And you forgot something, sister. ATM cameras don't lie." I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and played a short video clip I had obtained her walking up to the ATM, inserting the card, withdrawing the cash. Her face was undeniable. Her smile unmistakable. Gasps turned into whispers. My father's mouth tightened. My mother's hand shook as she clutched the photo. My sister's mask cracked. "This means nothing," she snapped. "So what if I withdrew a little? I was helping. She's always been bad with money. I was protecting her savings." I slammed my palm against the table. "Protecting you stole from me, from my son, from the future I bled for. And then you dared to humiliate me in front of everyone, dared to poison my son against me, dared to call me greedy while you stuffed your purse with the life I built. That isn't protection. That's betrayal." The room fell silent. My sister's eyes darted from face to face, desperate for support. But the whispers around the table were no longer against me. They were against her. She lied. How could she? Stealing from her own family, the tide was turning. My son stood then, his small voice cutting through the tension. "Mom's telling the truth?" All eyes swung to him. His hands shook, but his voice was clear. "She showed me everything last night. Aunt, you lied. You stole. I believed you for a while, but I won't anymore." His words were sharp, filled with pain, but also resolve. Tears blurred my vision as I looked at him. For the first time in weeks, I saw the trust return to his eyes. That trust was my victory, greater than any proof I could lay on the table. My father leaned back, silent, his jaw tight. My mother's face was pale, her lips pressed together in a thin line. Finally, she whispered, "How could you, daughter? How could you do this to your own blood?" My sister shook her head wildly, her mask crumbling. No, she set me up. You can't believe her. You always favored her. You never cared about me." But the more she spoke, the more desperate she sounded. Her friend from the cafe had even arrived late to join the gathering, and when asked, admitted nervously, "I saw her bragging about the money." She thought it was funny. The room erupted in whispers again, louder, sharper, undeniable. My sister's eyes filled with rage. "This isn't over," she spat, pointing at me. "I'll make you regret this." I gathered the papers, calmly sliding them back into the folder. My voice was steady as stone. "No, it is over. For the first time, it's over. You will never again take from me what I earned. and you will never again call me greedy while your hands reek of theft." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. My sister collapsed back into her chair, her face pale, her eyes darting trapped. The power she once held had evaporated, burned away by the fire of truth. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't in months: freedom. The silence after my sister's collapse didn't last long. Truth once spoken aloud doesn't stay contained within four walls. It leaks, it spreads, it burns. That night, the weight of her betrayal didn't just hang over me. It began to echo through the entire family, through the neighborhood, through everyone who had watched her mask of respectability slip away. The first witness to speak wasn't a relative, but Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor. She'd been invited to dinner by my mother as a courtesy, an extra chair always set for her since she lived alone. All night she had sat quietly, her hands folded, her eyes sharp. Now she cleared her throat and said I saw her, more than once, letting herself into her sister's apartment when she wasn't home, taking envelopes. I didn't want to interfere, but now I can't stay silent. Gasps rippled around the table. My sister's eyes went wide, her lips parting, but no words came. My father turned to Mrs. Alvarez, his voice low, almost pleading. "You're certain?" "I've lived across from her for 10 years, Mrs. Alvarez replied firmly. "I know what I saw, and I know what I didn't see: a greedy sister. What I saw was a hard-working woman sacrificing for her son." She turned to me, then her eyes warm, steady. "You don't deserve to be shamed. You deserve respect." For the first time in months, I felt the sting of tears, not from humiliation, but from vindication. Then another voice chimed in, my cousin Letitia. She shifted in her chair, her face pale but resolute. I didn't want to get involved before, but I overheard her at a party. She was laughing, saying how easy it was to take the money, how pathetic you were for saving instead of spending. I thought maybe she was drunk, maybe exaggerating, but now I know she meant every word. The whispers around the room swelled. Some relatives turned their eyes away from my sister, unable to look at her. Others shook their heads in disgust. My mother's hand trembled as she set her glass down, the liquid inside quivering like her composure. And then, like the final nail in the coffin, my boss, who happened to be a distant cousin, invited for the evening, spoke up. "She's not greedy," he said, his voice steady. "She's the hardest worker I've ever known. She skips meals, takes double shifts, saves every coin. She's done it all for her son. If anyone says otherwise, they're lying." He looked directly at my sister, his gaze unflinching. And now we know who the liar really is. The fire spread beyond the room. Phones buzzed as some relatives texted others the story, flying faster than we could contain it. By the end of the night, whispers had become shouts, shame had become public. My sister tried to stand, tried to regain control. "You're all turning against me because she staged this circus," she cried, her voice cracking. "You're blind, all of you." But no one believed her anymore. The witnesses had spoken, the proof had been laid bare. Even my father, who had always been stern, cold, and quick to judge me, turned to her with a look I had never seen before: disgust. "You've shamed us all," he said quietly. My mother sobbed, clutching her rosary, whispering prayers under her breath, as though trying to erase the stain on the family's name. My son stood beside me, his shoulders straight, his eyes blazing with pride. For weeks he had doubted me, but now in front of everyone he placed his hand firmly in mine. The gesture was small but monumental. My heart swelled, steady, strong. Do you know what it feels like when the truth finally catches fire? It doesn't just burn the lies, it burns the silence, the shame, the weight you've carried. It spreads like wildfire, and suddenly you are no longer alone. Others speak, others stand, others bear witness. The lie collapses, and the one who tried to bury you is the one left in the ashes. I looked around the room at every pair of eyes that had once judged me, and I spoke clearly, my voice strong. You believed her lies because she made them easy to believe. But the truth has always been harder. The truth is sacrifice, hunger, exhaustion. The truth doesn't glitter like jewelry or taste like wine. The truth is work. and I will never be ashamed of it again. The room was silent, but this time it wasn't hostile. It was reverent. They listened. They saw me and my sister. She sat, hunched her face, pale, her eyes wet, no longer the radiant star of the family, but a thief cornered by her own arrogance. I turned to the camera inside my heart, the one that recorded everything for moments like this, and I asked you, if you were here watching, would you side with the liar who stole or with the mother who sacrificed comment 1, if you believe the witnesses matter more than the lies? Hit like if you believe silence only helps the guilty. That night, I left my parents' house with my son at my side. The whispers followed us down the hall, spilling out into the night. But for the first time in months, they weren't whispers of judgment against me. They were whispers of truth, of vindication of a fire that would not be put out. And I walked away knowing this was no longer my private pain. It was public. And in that publicity, I was finally free. When the fire of truth spread, there was no way to control the damage it left behind. My sister thought humiliation would be my downfall, but in the end, it became hers. In the days that followed, her carefully constructed image of the golden daughter, the generous aunt, the respectable woman, shattered like glass beneath the weight of her own lies. And for the first time in years, I watched her stumble while I stood tall. The morning after the confrontation, the phone calls began. Relatives who had once whispered behind my back now called with apologies, their voices hesitant. "We should have trusted you. We're sorry we doubted you." Each word was bitter and sweet at once. Bitter because their belief had been so fragile, so easy to twist. Sweet because the truth had forced them to face their complicity. I accepted their apologies with quiet dignity, though inside I vowed never again to rely on their validation. My parents, once blinded by favoritism, now avoided my sister's calls. My father refused to speak to her for days. My mother sent me a trembling message. I didn't want to see it, but now I can't deny it. Forgive me. Forgive her. The question gnawed at me. For years, she had chosen my sister's lies over my truth. And now, when the evidence was undeniable, she asked forgiveness. I didn't answer right away. Forgiveness isn't a word you hand out like spare change. It has to be earned, and she had not earned it yet. My sister, cornered, tried to fight back. She accused me of forging documents, of bribing witnesses. She even hinted that I had manipulated my son into lying for me. But her words fell flat. The evidence was too strong, the witnesses too many. She received phone calls not of support but of condemnation. Her so-called friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with scandal. Even at her job, whispers circulated. I heard later that her boss called her in concerned about her reputation and how it reflected on the company. Her arrogance had once been her armor. Now it was her undoing. The law, too, had its say. With the bank statements and the testimony of witnesses, I filed an official complaint. The officer at the precinct looked at me with quiet respect as he read through the folder I laid on his desk. "This is solid," he said. "You did your homework. She won't talk her way out of this." My sister was summoned, forced to answer questions, forced to face the possibility of charges. For someone who had lived her whole life believing rules didn't apply to her, the cold weight of law was a blow she couldn't laugh away. As for me, something changed inside. The shame I had carried like a second skin peeled away. At work, I walked taller. My boss looked at me with new respect, giving me extra shifts, not out of pity, but out of recognition of my grit. My son, oh my son, his eyes no longer clouded with doubt, but shining with pride. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table, he reached across, took my hand, and whispered, "I'm sorry I doubted you, Mom. I know now. I know everything you did was for me." His words were worth more than all the stolen bills in the world. But aftermath is never simple. Victory carries its own weight. My sister's downfall tore through the family, leaving fractures that may never fully heal. My parents, ashamed, grew quiet, their voices softer whenever they spoke of her. Some relatives tried to pretend they had never believed her in the first place, rewriting their memories to protect themselves. Others cut ties with her completely. She became a ghost at gatherings, her absence louder than her presence had ever been. And me, I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. I felt steady. I felt free. But I also felt the scars. Nights when I lay awake, I still heard her voice calling me greedy, pathetic. Betrayal leaves echoes that even victory can't erase. Yet I learned something vital. Those echoes don't define me. My response to them does. One afternoon, I passed her on the street. She looked smaller, thinner, her eyes hollow. She avoided my gaze, clutching her purse as if it were armor. For a moment, I almost pitied her. But then I remembered the night she spilled my savings across the table, the way my son looked at me with doubt, the smirk she wore when she thought she had won. And pity turned to steel. She had chosen her path. She had chosen betrayal. Now she lived with its consequences. The community whispered about her, now not me. Neighbors who once looked at me with suspicion now nodded respectfully when we crossed paths. At the market, Mrs. Alvarez told me, "You did the right thing. Lies burn fast, but truth endures." Her words stayed with me. Do you understand what it means to go from being the subject of ridicule to the bearer of truth? It doesn't erase the pain, but it transforms it. It turns scars into armor, silence into a voice. And that's what the aftermath gave me, not joy, not triumph, but strength. My sister's lies had tried to bury me. Instead, they became the soil in which I grew stronger. She was left with nothing but ashes while I walked forward with my son, my dignity, and the knowledge that I had survived fire and come out unbroken. The dust eventually settled, though not without scars. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the noise of the scandal faded into background whispers. People had moved on, but for me, nothing was the same. Because once you've been betrayed by your own blood, you never look at family the same way again. You stop expecting protection, stop craving approval, and maybe that's what freedom really is, the moment you stop needing permission to exist with dignity. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my son. The old savings box, once the source of so much pain, sat empty between us. I could have thrown it away, but I didn't. I kept it as a reminder, not of loss, but of survival. My son looked at it then, at me, and asked, "What will we do now?" His voice wasn't afraid anymore. It was curious, steady. I smiled a real smile, one that didn't tremble. "We rebuild," I told him. "Not just money, not just savings. We rebuild trust. We rebuild dignity. And this time, no one can take it from us." The next morning, I opened a new account at the bank, secure and untouchable. This time, my name was the only one on the papers. As I signed the forms, I felt the weight of the pen like a sword in my hand. A small act, but powerful, a declaration that the future was ours again. Life didn't magically become easy. Bills still came. Work was still exhausting. But something inside me had shifted. I no longer moved with my head bowed. At the diner, I met customers' eyes. At family gatherings, I didn't shrink into corners. I didn't need their approval anymore, and that made me stronger than I'd ever been. My sister, she faded from the center of our family's universe. She still existed on the edges, bitter and resentful, but her power was gone. Her lies had devoured themselves. She had destroyed her own stage, and now the silence she once forced on me had become her prison. That was her aftermath, not mine. As for my son, he grew in ways I hadn't expected. Betrayal had taught him hard truths, but it had also shown him resilience. One evening, as he worked on homework at the table, he looked up and said, "Mom, you didn't just save money for me. You taught me what it means to fight for what matters." His words lit something in me brighter than any fortune. Do you see? That's what this whole story was about. Not money, not even betrayal, but dignity. The kind that no thief can steal. No lie can erase, no betrayal can destroy. So I want to ask you, the one listening, have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought you could trust? Did you stay silent, or did you rise and reclaim your voice? Because silence teaches people how to keep hurting you. But truth teaches them they can never bury you. Comment 1 if you believe dignity must always be defended. Hit like if you believe silence only feeds betrayal. Either way, let this story remind you we are never defined by what is taken from us. We are defined by what we choose to rebuild. The story of my sister's betrayal will live in family whispers for years to come. But for me and my son, it is no longer a wound. It is a scar. And scars are proof not of weakness, but of survival. The night it all began when she spilled my stolen savings across the table and called me greedy, I thought I had lost everything. But looking back now, I see the truth. I didn't lose. I was reborn. And sometimes, that's the gift betrayal leaves behind the fire that forges you into who you were meant to be.